Hola, aquí Juan G. Acosta, esto es Habitación Sonora. Últimamente vengo observando que algunos vídeos que hice con traducciones, que les puse subtítulos, eran vídeos sobre personalidades del jazz. Os dejo algunos en la descripción por si os interesa. Pues estos vídeos siguen despertando interés, veo que siguen teniendo visitas y nada, me ha animado por tanto a hacer otra traducción, en este caso del gran PAT METHENY. Sí, sé que es Pat Methenny, pero nadie me va a acostumbrar a decirlo así. Así que voy a decir Methenny todo el tiempo, me perdonáis. Y nada, este vídeo me ha encantado porque se trata de un tema que hablo habitualmente con mis alumnos y que además de siempre he empleado la misma analogía. Así que cuando lo vi, pues bueno, me encantó porque me identifiqué y aparte porque él lo explica muchísimo mejor que yo, ¿no? Lo hace con la lucidez de un genio de esta altura, ¿no? Así que nada, vamos a pasar a ver el vídeo, que es súper interesante, y os vais fijando en la traducción que os he preparado.
When you are playing, do you completely play just what's in your head, or do you use kind of concepts, tonality concepts?
I see what you're saying. Well, for me, I'm going to use an analogy that I heard from Gary Burton, which is
Gary Burton es un vibrafonista, una de las leyendas del jazz, que tuvo Pat Methenny la suerte de empezar tocando con él, ¿vale? Fue como un poco como su mentor, y ahora ya veréis más adelante como también nos cuenta que fue un poco su maestro, ¿no? Ahora vamos a escucharle.
is a great one, which is, you just asked me a question. You've been speaking English a long time, you know how to speak English. Somewhere in your mind, you were putting together verbs and adjectives and pronouns, and you were doing all the grammar that was correct for you to get the meaning across. Improvisation is exactly the same. There's a language that's, has grammar. And, this is a language I've been dealing with for 20 years now. And I mean, in terms of sitting down and if you were to hand me, 50 unrelated chords, I could solo through them, and all those connections would be made, and I would play 90% right notes, or correct things. But I would also be hearing it because I would be having ideas, and they all kind of go together, which to me just comes from experience and just doing it a lot. For me, while I'm playing, I'm not thinking about tonalities or chords or this or that, but it's an element in what I'm doing. Just like while I'm speaking to you now, in the front of my mind, I'm not thinking about verbs and adjectives and nouns. I'm just talking because I can do it. Yeah. And it's the same with improvisation. But learning the grammar of improvisation is a fairly difficult job. For me, to really understand the vocabulary of improvisation as implied by Charlie Parker and John Coltrane is, it's a good 6 or 7 year study.
6, 7 o 70, ¿no? O nunca terminar de llegar a ese nivel, ¿no? Vamos a seguir, y por supuesto, si este tipo de vídeos os parece que están guay, os parece que aportan, decídmelo en comentarios, porque bueno, ya tengo algunos vistos que así de este tipo, que podría ser interesante también traducirlos, ¿vale? Venga, seguimos.
Minimum to really get it so that you're fluent in that vocabulary. And to me, this is essential. You have to have a strong sense of the bebop language to play any kind of jazz. And when I
Una vez un profesor me comentaba que el bebop es como el latín, ¿no? Es como la madre de las lenguas, hay que conocerlo, ¿no? Aunque te guste o no, hay que conocer el latín. En este caso, Pat Methenny va más allá, no es que hay que conocerlo, es que hay que dominarlo, ¿no? Hay que hablarlo, y luego ya puedes hablar las lenguas que derivaron de él, ¿no?
Hear guys, whether they're free guys or fusion guys or new age guys or whatever you call it, that don't have the bebop language down, I always get bored, because to me that's the foundation that everything else is built on. And in this sense, I'm very conservative. I don't have too much tolerance for music that doesn't have that language as a part of it. So,
esto es muy interesante Bueno, aquí obviamente nos estamos restringiendo al mundo del jazz, pero es una discusión o un tema que ha surgido alguna que otra vez con colegas y demás, ¿no? ¿Es necesario aprender todo lo anterior para hacer lo tuyo, para construir tu historia? Porque al fin y al cabo, y de eso también va a hablar Methenny después, de lo que se trata es de utilizar todas estas herramientas para contar nuestro propio discurso, ¿no? Entonces, ¿es necesario conocer y estudiar tan duro, sobre todo en el caso del jazz y el bebop, todo ese lenguaje anterior, o podemos empezar de cero? ¿Se puede empezar la casa por el tejado o no? Él, en este caso, Methenny, él mismo lo dice, es muy conservador. Él opina que sí, que hay que conocer totalmente el lenguaje del bebop porque es la base. ¿Qué opináis vosotros de eso? Dejádmelo en comentarios porque ese es un tema muy interesante. ¿Seguimos?
I guess the answer to your question is simple, which is yes, I do think in terms of notes and chords and melodies, but it's on a subconscious level, and I'm basically, when I'm playing, I'm just playing what I hear, but all those other elements are in there.
Yes, and is this already the 20 years, or because I noticed that in the people are different. There are people who need who feel the need to constantly know what they are doing. Did you have the same process in yourself in the beginning, and then later on it's getting fluid?
Yeah, and it's difficult. It's hard, and especially at the beginning, to play on a tune where there's chords going by like this. It's not something that too many people instantly can do. I mean, you do have to take the time to learn it. And of course, when you're starting, it's like kind of overwhelming. But, it's a matter of time and just doing it, and also being around people who can do it. I think is maybe the best thing. In my case, I was very lucky because I grew up around Kansas City in Missouri, where there was a very active jazz scene. And my education wasn't sitting in a room with a book. It was being with guys going 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then doing the best I could, and that was a great situation for me to be in because it was for real. It wasn't theoretical. It was like, do it, and I sounded very bad. I mean, I was only 15 or 16 years old at the time.
Aquí yo añadiría además la importancia de tocar, ¿no? De tocar con gente, de hacer bolos, de tirarse a la piscina, porque además te obliga a tener un repertorio. Muchas veces si nos quedamos en casa tocando, pues al final no sales de los mismos temas y creo que especialmente en el tema del jazz y demás, los estándares, etcétera, es muy importante eso, tener el bolo, porque así te los tienes que aprender, un repertorio y tirarte y tocar mal, sonar fatal. Yo sigo sonando fatal, pero cuando empecé a hacerlo sonaba aún peor. Pero así es para todos, ¿eh?
In the first couple years, I sounded terrible. But gradually, and I'm still working to try and get better, but as you do it more, you get more insight and wisdom about what it is that you're trying to do. And it's a difficult process, but I do feel like it's something that can be quantified. I mean, it's something that you can learn on a sort of like you're talking about on an intellectual level, at least just to get the grammar of it down. I mean, there's a whole other point after what we're talking about, which is actually the most important part, which is the sort of actual creativity. I mean, what you finally do play. But we're sort of talking on a more basic level, just the nuts and bolts of it. And I would say, yeah, you have to understand it on an intellectual level first. I mean, on a, like you were talking about having it in your mind what you're doing all the time. I think that's step one, but there's, a few other steps after that. Eventually, you want to get it to where you're not thinking about it.
But, people like Chet Baker, he didn't know the changes theoretically. So it's possible to just hear it and play it.
Yes, there's a number of examples of that. Freddie Hubbard's a good example of that too. Ornette Coleman is a great example of that.
Chet Baker, todos lo conoceréis, trompetista, cantante, y Ornette Coleman bueno, se le considera uno de los pioneros del free jazz. Y si os interesa esta parte del vídeo, sobre si es necesaria la teoría o no, tengo un vídeo que hice hace tiempo sobre este tema, donde toco cosas de las que va a comentar ahora Metheny y demás, y os puede interesar, lo dejo en la descripción. Seguimos.
But all of these people that I've known, that I've hung out with, you know, they say, I don't know changes, but they do.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, they don't call it. I mean,
They have
even
their own system.
yeah, even for me, because of where I grew up and the people that I played with, they didn't talk about a diminished scale, but they played it, and they didn't talk about the harmonic minor to this and that, but they played it. And for me, when I joined Gary Burton, his group, he's maybe the best guy I've seen in terms of being able to clearly describe harmony and really say, okay, when you see this and you do this because of that. You know, I mean, he can really explain it. And in about 6 months, he took me aside and said, look, you know, when you see this and you're doing that, what you're really doing is, you know, mixolydian to this, to that. And then I learned it. But before I had somebody like him to sit down next to me, I was doing all those things. I just didn't have the official name for it.
Y ya sabéis, si os interesa este contenido y no estáis suscritos, suscribirse, darle a la campanita y así os notifican cuando saco cualquier vídeo. Acepto cualquier sugerencia sobre contenido futuro, sean entrevistas, sean traducciones, sean por supuesto videotutoriales de guitarra, que es lo que más hago, análisis de temas. Comentadme, decidme y ayudadme para continuar con el canal, haciendo que crezca, haciendo que llegue cada vez a más gente y que mejore el contenido, que es sobre todo lo más importante. Besos, hasta pronto.